welcome to Defying Dice, a weekly D&D podcast where me and my friends get together and play Dungeons & Dragons, and you get to listen to it. I'm the Dungeon Master for our game, and in this episode I'll be telling you how the world was created, what the world's backstory is, and who the characters are. I hope you enjoy. So, to start it off, as I introduce myself, I'm Clinton, the Dungeon Master, and for this episode I will be talking to you solo. I'm going to basically go through what the campaign is, the setting of it, our characters briefly, just to give you an idea of where the campaign is and how it will go. So first off, we're playing in Dungeons & Dragons, the 5th edition. Me and my friends have been playing for just under a year, give or take. I bought the starter set and the player's handbook, and we decided to try that out for a little bit, and turned out we really enjoyed it, so we decided to continue on with that, and I built a homebrew campaign off of the starter set, and we played that for about 8 months or so, and we were having a really great time. We got up to level, I think, 9 or 10 towards the end there, and then me and Jared both had an idea of, hey, let's start a podcast, see if people might enjoy listening to our own version of Dungeons & Dragons. So for now, it is going to be a new campaign. I'm making a campaign specifically for this podcast, and it's completely homebrew, but I probably will be stealing a lot of stuff from different genres or ideas, that type of thing. So don't judge me. I'm not very creative. But it's going to be in a standard D&D setting. Basically, there's dwarven mines, there's elven cities, there's humans, there's gnomes, there's elves, there's monsters, there's dragons, of course, dungeons, lots of adventure, but everything is essentially homebrew. And because it is a homebrew setting and the way we play, the rules, they're important because rules are important in a game, but my favorite rule in the player's handbook is bend the rules. It's a very important thing in my game to have more story, more epic moments that when you come off the table, you're like, man, that was a great game. That's what I'm aiming for when we play the game and when I be the Dungeon Master. So, might bend rules here or there, or make some stuff that might seem impossible possible, because that's the rule. Cool, you gotta make it fun. But we'll start off here to explain what the world is. I essentially created this one singular planet named Orin. It has, over the years, been through some changes, so we'll start off from the very start. Originally, the planet was a molten sun, essentially. There was lava, rocks, very little, just molten magma all the way around. And after thousands of years, during this age of fire, dragons started to appear out of the lava. It started off being the gold and red dragons who had built that resistance to fire. They started to emerge, bringing up and creating their own land masses through the molten rock, managing to create a massive continent. And as times passed, the gold and red dragons created more different varieties of dragons, the blues, the whites, the silvers, the coppers, all that type of thing. They all started to bring in during this time. And once that started happening, that's when the Age of Dragons began. They all built domains all over this one large continent, and they all lived relatively peacefully. It led for about thousands of years. I don't exactly have a proper number, but give or take, 2 to 5,000 years of this, and they dwelled peacefully. But over time, the chromatic and the metallic dragons, who normally don't get together, decided to forge a new race for them to rule over. So they created the elves and the dwarves, and as they went, they started creating more. The humans, the gnomes, the halflings, that type of thing. That all kind of spread out organically over the past few years as they were creating these races to rule over. But when they were subjugating these races, that's when the rift started to appear between the two chromatic and metallic dragons. It got so bad that they in fact had a war over who would be ruling. It took about 20 years for this war to end up finishing, and it finished by having all of the other races that were subjugated, those elves, dwarves, humans, they all got together with the help of a few dragons and created a massive arcane nuke, essentially. A massive weapon that would destroy basically the world to try and put an end to the war. And it definitely did. They set the bomb basically in the center of the continent and detonated it right in the middle of a war. And the blast was so catastrophic that it left a massive crater in the center and split the one main continent into 4 smaller continents. As the blast went off, the arcane pulse went through this rocky, barren, magma-ish landscape and started creating water through the lava, creating vegetation on the rocky, barren continents. It also started to change the animals, the races, created these new monsters, not just the dragons, these massive creatures of, your bugbears, your stuff like that, your owlbears. They all sprung from this arcane blast. It also, where the crater is in between the 4 continents, and that flooded with water because it was such a low point, creating the Central Sea, which is right in the center of the whole planet. Right in the middle there is the ruins from the Dragon Age, the Broken Isles, and it's split off into these new continents. This singular moment is referred to as the splitting of the world. Once the blast cooled, all the magma, the water, everything settled, a few small survivors from the different races, the human, elves, and dwarves, decided to not fight. Whatever dragons were left over were essentially calling peace. That's when the era of peace stepped in. These new races decided to create massive cities, specifically for finding out knowledge and to gain more information of the world, to have studies in civilized times. And it's been going on for about 700 years, and that's where our adventure comes into. We have our characters in this world set up, and they'll be exploring in this time the era of peace. So the whole continent, the whole world, is Orin. That is what the realm is, basically. Orin is the name of the whole place. Then there's the 4 different continents, and the Broken Isles in the middle of the Central Sea. So, towards the north is the continent of Riven. Now, Riven is basically Wild Man's country. This is where all the monsters, everything fled out to and has not been civilized very well at all. It's evergreen forests in snowy tundra, massive mountains, very wild and unkept. And this is where the city of Kron is built. Kron is heavily fortified. It's been around since the Age of Dragons. It was split off, it was built upon as they went. It's this rough and tumble city where all these different cultures gather. So long as you're strong enough to live in the area, you can live in the area. Very few people live anywhere other than the city because the creatures are just taking over everything else in that whole area. But anybody that does live in Kron, they are fighters, and they're bounty hunters, and they hunt stuff. They're where the badasses are, basically. Then we get to the east. This is the standard area. This is where our players will start, in Orin. That is the continent's name. It's the most temperate and varied of the land masses. It has a majority of grass fields and rolling hills, rivers, lakes, mountains, all that type of thing. Very nice. It does have a few old, dense forests, tall, massive trees, and they also have young forests set there. There's more swampy areas towards the south. There's a large mountain range to the east and a little bit to the north. And this is where most of the civilization, after the splitting of the world, this is where most of the civilizations stayed. And this is where they built their cities. Now, one of the first cities that was founded was the Elven city of Theed. This is high in the Emerald Mountains. This city is built for elves. Nobody else really lives there other than a few slaves here and there, but it's mostly just elven kind, and they stick to themselves. But this is where they studied arcana, and this is where they studied the magics, the world, to get knowledge, built massive libraries, and studied that for hundreds of years. And that's where most of the elves come from and move back and forth. If you're an elf, you're more than likely in Theed, and if you're not in Theed, you're probably an outcast. That's the way it is. Then, on the Iron Band, another mountain strip to the north, Iron Band is the name of the city, in the mountains of Silverthorn. They are to the north of Orin. The Iron Band is this massive mine that the dwarves have built. It spirals down way deep in the earth, and they have been mining and crafting there ever since the splitting of the world. They focus on smithing, building. They are masters of the art, and they keep trying to do it. They keep very close to themselves because they've seen what happened, and they, try and keep themselves pretty safe. But that's definitely a place where the dwarves are. It's sturdy, they got security, they just build and prosper there. But then, they also have one other city. And this is where all the others go. The outcasts that are specifically not elves or dwarves or haven't screwed up in one of those cities. And they come to Farron. Farron's on the eastern coast of it, off the Central Sea there. And this is the biggest city out of the 3, and is the biggest one in the whole realm. It is basically, like America, for what it is worth. Everybody comes there, everybody goes in there. They all live in, relative peace, but there's slums, high points. There is a few rulers. This is where the Thieves Guild come in, Warriors Guild. They all bring into this massive mixing pot of cultures, and they all live together in somewhat unity. And that's the big city. That's where you want to go to, unless you are trying to find something specifically from the elves or dwarves. But everything outside of these cities, it's slowly getting more civilized, but at the moment there is still quite a few creatures and dangers out in the wild. But most of the massive creatures are not on this continent. They've been hunted out or pushed out, or they've hidden. Then we have Nazrin. Nazrin is on the southern part of Orin, so just directly south of Riven from the Central Sea. And this is a desert continent. This is essentially the Sahara. There is a few small villages, there is one large city down there, and this is where most of the criminals from the other continent to the east and Riven, all the criminals get shipped down here. They get basically set free, here you go, you can't really leave, and if you do leave, you're sent right back. It's that type of thing. And because of that, these, crafty criminals manage to build this massive city, and they all live there, they get what they get done, but they're in it for themselves. It's a very interesting place, but, it's got lots of secrets into it, which I find very fascinating. Then there's Macon. Macon is to the west. Now this is picture for picture what it looked like during the era of dragons. That type of thing. The rocky magma, this is where most of this was left over. It's basically like Mordor from Lord of the Rings. Like, it's not the nicest place to be. There's volcanoes, there's lava, there's rocks. People don't go there. Specifically because you just don't go there. They don't know of any civilized cultures that are there in popular knowledge. Nothing lives there. Nobody goes there. It's just left out on the side, and it's for, it's just a trash pile. Like, nobody's gonna go there. That's the four main continents set up there. Orin to the east, Riven to the north, Nazrin to the south, and Macon to the west. But right in the center is the Broken Isles and the Central Sea. Now the Broken Isles are from when the world split from that massive arcane bomb, and it scattered anything that was in there and just made a bunch of little islands pop up in this area. So everything underneath the Central Sea is remains from the era of dragons, and what's left of them that's high enough is the Broken Isles. Ships can't really navigate through the area because it's so rocky and dense, so there's not very many people that actually have been there. But the wealth of knowledge could be extremely valuable down there. So many have tried, but few have succeeded. It's not the greatest place to be, but, tropical islands, it's always nice. And that is essentially the world of Orin in a nutshell, in me rambling on about it. It is an interesting world. I can't say it's unique because I steal a bunch of stuff from different areas, different pop culture and science fiction, but it's my own world, and I think it'll be interesting to go through the different areas, splitting them up, and I got a few storylines that might be interesting with it. So I'm really happy with that. Now we'll get into our PCs, and this is a little bit interesting. I'll give you background on our players. I'm playing with 4 other people, so 5 total with myself included. We have a party of 4, and we have 1 wizard, 1 barbarian, 1 bard, and a druid. I'm really excited to see this played. When we played in our last campaign, we only had a thief, a fighter, a barbarian, and a monk. So they're very different. There's more spellcasting in this, and everybody's kind of new to that whole situation, so I'm excited to see what everybody does with it, but it might be a little bit slow for some as we get through it. I'm excited to see what we have here, and we'll go to the character introductions right here, right now. The races that live today all came from the dragon's need to rule. But after the Great War, all the enslaved races were set free to live peacefully, except the Goliaths. They are the biggest and strongest civilized race alive, and were coveted by Zarek, an ancient green dragon who hid them away during the war, even to this day. Vegamin Letham was born and raised in Macon under Zarek's rule. The dragon would often leave the tribe for extended periods of time, allowing a small amount of freedom while not under Zarek's watch for the tribe. While the dragon was away, the volcano near where the tribe was camped erupted, wiping out 90% of the tribe instantly. While Vegaman was trying his best to rescue as many as he could, only a dozen badly burned of his tribe survived. The tribe was headed to extinction. Seeing their hopeless situation, the remaining tribe members worked together, building a simple ship and loading it with as much food as they had, and set out in hopes of finding another tribe and a new home. After months, the boat finally landed on the shores of Orin. Vegamin set out in search of other Goliaths, vengeance for his tribe, and to bring an honorable legacy as the last living member of his tribe. Gilbert Flint is from the gnome city of Oakroot, found deep in a forest. His family in Oakroot has always been honorable and prestigious. The men have always been known as remarkable, courageous, and bringing honor to the family name, a family name that is very influential in the city. The Flint family is in charge of keeping good folk in the town and banishing criminal or unworthy residents of the city. They do a lot of good for the residents of Oakroot, but their position has put a target on the family. Gilbert, during his 40-ish years of life, never really matured from young adulthood, physically or mentally, staying abnormally short, even for a gnome, and never doing meaningful work if possible. Much to his father's grief, he even abuses his family's name and reputation to make others do his own responsibilities. His father is a brilliant student of biology and tried to instill his love for the science of nature in his son. However, Gilbert was never interested in studying plants and animals, but to care for them and befriend them instead, becoming one with the natural world. Disheartened with the actions and attitude of his son, Gilbert's father banished him from Oakroot, only allowing him to return when he makes an honorable name for himself. Disgraced and forced from home, Gilbert gathered his belongings and, leaving the city, slowly making his way into the forest. Grandson to the ruling family of Theed, the massive elven city, Alexander Phoenix is an astute studier of the arcane arts. Being born into the royal family in an exclusively elven culture sounds like a dream for many, but for Alexander, it was a life of constant harassment and shunning from the purebred elves in the city. When he was born, the shock of a half-elf, half-human child in the royal family led to a cover-up of the unfaithful mother and the bastard child. As far as the public knows, Alexander was adopted by the royal family, showing how accepting and kind the ruling class is to non-elven members of society. Alexander never fit in while growing up and receded into the study halls and libraries every chance he got. Over time, his love for information and study led him to believe not everything from the Age of Dragons has been discovered. He studied for years until his obsession led him to leave his city to prove his theories true. Ren grew up working under his parents in the Fallen Stone mine. As the son of the owners, Ren was set up to take over the largest non-dwarven mine in Orin. But he was bored with his life, and the one that he was being groomed for he wanted no part of. He wanted to pursue his passion for music. His mother and father disapproved of his choices and crushed that idea as often as he brought it up. So he hid his passion for years. Working in a workshop he created in the mine, he would build musical instruments and practice playing whenever he could slip away from his mine work. Ren desired to create a special musical instrument, unlike any that had been built. But after many attempts, he hasn't been able to finish it. He decided to leave the family mine in search of a different life and a way to finish his instrument. So before we bring this end of the podcast to a close, I just want to thank you so much for listening to it. We really do appreciate it. And if we could ask you for one small favor, if you could just rate us on iTunes, that would be a big boost to our search visibility, and we would really appreciate it a lot. A lot of work goes into this podcast, and it's nice to get more people listening to it if possible. So yeah, tell your friends if they might enjoy this type of show. Let them know about it so that we can, build a bit more of an audience so that more people can enjoy our show. If you want to get a hold of us, we have a website, defyingdice.com, where we have the character backstories there, a blog where you can post comments and follow us there. There's also Twitter. We have a Defying Dice, or at Defying Dice for Twitter. You can follow us there, and you'll get our up-to-date information of what we're doing, when, and all that fun stuff. And you can message us too and let us know how we're doing it. Well, what we could do to improve, what you enjoy about the show, what you don't enjoy. Any feedback is good feedback. We really appreciate it, as long as you stay creative or constructive. But once again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.